Yeah, so our session today is balancing monetization and engagement, and we were bouncing around topics of, to have for a panel, and it always seemed like we talk about monetization, engagement, like there's some kind of trade-off, right? There's some balance that needs to be achieved, and you can't have all of one if you want to have all the other. And I think it's a really fascinating topic because, I think it's interesting to ask, is that a correct hypothesis? Is there this balance? Is there this trade-off between engagement and monetization? And how as publishers and developers and games people in general, how can we manage this process? So that's what we're here to discuss today. I'm David Pokress. I'm SVP of Games Publishing at AdColony. We're a leading ad networks focusing on the mobile space. And I am honored to share the table with three great people. Chris Heatherly from Disney, Greg Canessa from GSN, and Tammy Levy from Kongregate. And I'm going to ask them just to give a brief introduction to themselves, and then tell us what game you're playing most right now, and what game you spent the most money on.
What game I spent the most money on?
Yeah, mobile.
So I oversee mobile games at Disney, primarily the Disney and Star Wars portfolio. Other than Pokemon Go, because I thought you were going to rule out Pokemon Go, which I've been playing a lot.
I decided that was unfair.
I'm playing Egg Inc. Does anybody know Egg Inc? I really like Egg Inc. because I think it's a innovation in the idle game. I'm very interested in the idle game genre because a friend of mine did Adventure Capitalist. So I'm interested to see how that genre is developing. So that happens to be the one in the moment.
So I'm Greg Canessa. I oversee the competitive and skill games business for GSN. And the game I'm playing most right now, aside from Pokemon Go, is Clash Royale. So I'm a huge fan of Clash Royale. The game I've spent the most money on is not Clash Royale. It's actually Clash of Clans. If you look at Lifetime, I dumped a lot of money into that game. I don't play it that much anymore, but I'd say they've got my money. Supercell's definitely nailed it for me.
I'm Tammy Levy. I'm the director of product at Kongregate. I oversee our publishing portfolio. So we work with tons of small developers and actually all size developers. In terms of games that I'm playing, I'm definitely playing Pokemon Go as everyone else. Clash Royale, a ton of Clash Royale. One of our games, Adventure Capitalist. But actually the one that I've been playing the most outside of those is, and I'm going to sound like a big nerd, but there was a fencing game that was released a couple of weeks ago. I used to be a professional fencer, so I'm super into it.
Nice.
Great. All right, so I kind of set the premise of the talk around engagement and monetization. That was my hypothesis, or just something that I actually encounter every day when I talk to publishers about finding that balance. And I'm going to ask our esteemed panel, is this a conversation you're having? Are you always talking about monetization and engagement together? Is it separate? How do they come together? Is this even a worthy conversation to be having? So, Tammy, start with you.
Yeah, so it's actually a conversation that we have every day. I think it's the topic that we focus on the most, from looking at games we're evaluating, doing competitive research, and preparing our own games for launch. I think that there's not one without the other, and it's been unfortunate that a lot of times it's been one or the other as a conversation in a lot of companies. But honestly speaking, you can't have monetization if you don't have players. You don't have players if you don't engage them. So ultimately, it's not one or the other. You have to focus on both. They both have their place, and they interact with each other. So you really need to focus holistically and think about the game holistically to make sure that you have players that you can monetize.
Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I don't think that we were talking about this earlier. You can look across all the games in the App Store, and there aren't really any examples of games that make a lot of money that people don't come back to on a really frequent basis, probably every day. And there's no examples of games that people come to on a frequent basis that don't make money in some form. You know, and we were talking about Pokemon Go. I mean, you know, there are a lot of things about that design. It's, you know, it's actually a very loose game, and I think a lot of people from a free-to-play standpoint probably could, you know, would have looked at that game design document and criticized the game on the basis of, oh, this isn't pinchy enough, and it doesn't have enough mechanics, and where's the guilds, and all kinds of stuff like that. But the fact that it's so engaging and people want to play it is why they're paying in it. They're almost, you know, people almost want, you know, what we find is people want to pay in games that they like.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that it is absolutely something that's on our mind every day. From my vantage point at GSN, it is. I would echo what these guys have said around. You know, you need to focus on both. I would just add that, you know, I come from more of a traditional games industry background, less about sort of the modern era about just analytics and monetization of a widget. So really, for me, it's not about monetization principally. It's about creating a compelling core loop that is fun and addictive, and people want to keep coming back to. From that comes monetization opportunities. Focus on your game, focus on the quality of the game, focus on engaging your player and retaining your player, and then provide opportunities to monetize, and things will work well. You do the converse, which is frankly something my company and others have struggled with, especially from non-gaming sort of types that come in and are like, right, monetize. That works in the short term, and long term it doesn't work. It fizzles out, and it'll end up being a net neutral to negative on your business. Rather, if you focus on the engagement and retention components and then provide the monetization opportunities, it leads for a longer term, sustainable, more annuity style business.
Yeah, the more sorry, just to add one more point. The more and more I do this, I just continue to, you know, there's some lessons that just you keep learning again and again and again. And, yeah, you know, it's like you can never pay enough attention to that first user player session, and I like the Miyamoto rule of 3 for those who know that rule, which is like, you know, the first 3 seconds, the first 30 seconds, the first 3 minutes, the first 3 hours. And so you think about how do you hook people and how do you make that engaging kind of in those, you know, increments. And, you know, I just find that, you know, free-to-play games are this funny thing where it's like, I've got to spend an enormous amount of time on that first, you know, 3 minutes, but I also need to keep you for 3 years. So you've really got to think about, you know, each of those things, you know, in a very deliberate way.
So do your teams know that when they come to you and present new game ideas or prototypes that, hey, you know, Chris is going to be looking for the 30 seconds, for the 3 minutes, for the 3 hours, that type of detail?
Yeah, it's something that actually we've been talking about a lot lately, because when I play games that the team is working on, I will not force myself to play them. If I'm not enjoying them, I put them down. And, you know, one of the things that we've been doing a lot more in our sprint reviews is like, let's just sit down and play the game from the very beginning. Because, you know, people get lost, right? You know, when you're working on a project, you've been playing the game and you're level 38 or whatever, and you're really invested and you don't want to start over because it's a pain, you know, but you have to, right? Because reliving that first, you know, we just released this game, Emoji Blitz, and I've played that game from the beginning probably 20 times. And every time I play that game, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm dreading like starting over. But every time I play that game, I just start feeling like I'm getting rewarded. I'm getting stuff. I'm really getting, like, I get hooked on the game all over again. And the fact that I can do that after doing it 20 times tells me that other people are going to do it, and we're having a lot of success with that title. But I think you can spend way too much time thinking about elder content and what's going to happen in month, you know, 3, right? And not spend enough time on, is this game fun in the first place? Right.
And then how do you factor in the monetization part of that as well? It sounds like that's really heavy engagement. Like, how do I keep somebody for, you know, the 3s? And then, but how do you start thinking about monetization from the very beginning? Is it something you optimize over time as you're testing it? I mean,
yeah, you have to think about it from the very beginning. You have to design it in, and the same thing with advertising. We talked about this a lot. We learned it from you guys, which is, you know, you've got to think about how are the various ways that the player is going to pay you, whether it be in, you know, their time, their money, advertising, social, whatever it is, and you've got to, and you really want to train users. One of the things I've learned is we're way too gentle sometimes in this industry, and you've got to teach people how to play the game, and monetization is part of that. If they don't know how to pay, they often don't know how to really engage deeply.
Right. You know? Tammy, you work with a lot of different like developers, I mean, Kongregate does an amazing job bringing together a huge diversity of games. When you're dealing with a bunch of, well, with a new publisher, we'll say, what's your process like with them, and how do you work with them to get them to think about, do you have to get them to think about engagement? Do you have to get them to think about monetization? And how does that process work for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we do work with a lot of developers, and it really depends on the developer. Like some developers will come with like really engaging core loops, and they have no idea on how to monetize the game. For us, that's actually the easiest product that we can get our hands on, because just doing it time and time again, moving retention and engagement, it's incredibly hard once the game is live. You can do it, but you need a lot of resources. And a lot of these developers don't have those resources. One of our biggest titles, they have 2 engineers. And it's doing really well, and it's a great game, but on 2 engineers, you can't really like push your retention by 10 percentage points, right? Put the resources that you would need to be able to do that. So when we get a game that has a really engaging core loop, we're off to the races because we know how to monetize, and we can start teaching the developers, okay, we need to create that monetization strategy on top of it, but you already have an engaging game. When we get games that have kind of all these ideas to monetize, usually they're kind of a mashup of features. They're just like, oh yeah, I grabbed this from Clash of Clans because it looks great and it monetizes really well, and I grabbed this from, now Clash Royale is coming up, and Game of War, and Hearthstone, and suddenly it's kind of, there's no heart to the game. You just have all of these monetization mechanics. Usually those are some of the trickier conversations that we have to have with developers, because they might be really excited about the game, but it's not a game actually. It's just a bunch of features put together to make money, and it won't last long. We could launch it, we could get some users in, we'll get some revenue out of it, but it's not going to be a game that can be live and have a successful live at the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year mark.
Excellent. So, I mean, at GSN, you guys have been around for a long time, and some really great apps that have been very successful for a long period of time. Do you find, Greg, that you have to change strategies over time as titles mature? How do you find that either the balance between monetization, does the balance change between monetization and engagement? Do you have to utilize different engagement tools or different monetization tools as the title gets older? Is there any lessons for the audience around that as titles mature, if they should be so lucky to have a title that matures?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, our business is a little varied in that we have, sort of our core social casino and bingo operations, and then we have sort of our new initiative around competitive gaming, which is a little different. But just starting with the social casino and bingo operations, absolutely you need to change over time. And I think that that one of the things we've done is each one of our products have been in a slightly different state of maturity. With our social casino business, I think it started off being more about monetization, straight up monetization opportunities. And then over time, what we've realized, frankly, from some of our competitors that have done even a better job than we have of this, that the name of the game really is about engagement and retention. I think, Slotomania is a good example, with Playtika of a company that has built a really great, well-retaining, engages you daily slot machine experience, and that they then provide monetization, contextual monetization opportunities around. And so there's been a focus or shift of focus in our casino operations away from pure monetization opportunities and towards engagement and retention. Our Bingo Bash business, on the other hand, from the get-go was designed for engagement and retention, right? Mm-hmm. The core game of bingo, or whatever, but they've done a great job. That team has done a great job sort of building a framework, a social and progression-based framework around collectibles and level ups and other things that engage the user, keep them coming back. They variegate the rooms, the bingo rooms, to add new mechanics on a regular basis. And that app retains and engages very, very well. And that has been a successful business because of that, because those monetization opportunities have been interwoven into what is intrinsically a core loop surrounding a very basic play mechanic.
Right. And actually, you mentioned the competitive gaming initiative at GSN, the
right.
Sparkade. which you're leading. And
Right.
that's, I guess, a different take at kind of leveraging monetization and engagement. Can you tell the audience a little bit what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is we're effectively trying to create a legitimate alternative to the existing business models we're all enjoying right now in mobile, of free-to-play and advertising, by creating a third leg in the stool, a legitimate alternative to those monetization methods that we're calling Sparkade. Sparkade is both an app and a platform that effectively brings competitive, casual games for free or for real money. So you're playing skill-adapted versions of the world's biggest mobile franchises, some of the world's biggest mobile games like Tetris, Scrabble, Pac-Man. You're playing special skill-adapted versions of that. And we've created a free-to-download app that you download from the app stores, or you will download, it's not out yet. You will download from the app stores, and you'll be able to play tournaments based on these skill-adapted versions of these games for practice tokens or for real money, and actually win cash prizes out of this, and fully withdrawable cash that you can, spend on other things. And what we've done there is we have leveraged what's great about free-to-play in terms of engagement and retention mechanics by creating a progression system and a metagame surrounding those skill-adapted sort of play for cash tournaments that engages the user on a daily basis and retains them, and then create the contextual monetization opportunities around the cash tournament model and around later on advertising. So we've effectively taken what we're talking about here but applied it to an entirely new business model that will engage and retain the user through daily challenges and loot boxes with collectible fans and other things that we're doing in the app. But the core loop itself is we think really fun and addictive, which is playing Tetris for free or for cash, playing Scrabble for free or for cash, playing Pac-Man for free or for cash. And that skill-adapted version we've innovated working with our IP partners, whether it's EA or Hasbro or Namco Bandai, to do special versions of those games that are not just sort of pure skill versions, but are also new play mechanics and new surprises for the user that are the game you know and love, but a new twist on it, and it's timed. So that core loop keeps people coming back over it again and again and again, and then that progression system and metagame that you have around it, brings customers back day after day after day.
Right.
So I could be a professional Pac-Man player.
You can, you can. We think that's actually one of the opportunities, is to create micro communities for engagement. We all know League of Legends, CSGO, we know these big games that have huge communities and have esports around them, and we all lust after that, right? As game creators, we all lust after, oh my God, what is the 1 part per million out there of that game? If my game hits, I have this mega phenomenon. There's lots of games out there, especially smaller games and casual games, that deserve those communities. They just don't have the wherewithal or the resources, or there just isn't enough time in everyone's day to have fill Staples Center with a Scrabble tournament or whatever, or Pac-Man. But there's still these micro communities, right? Twitch streamers, YouTubers. There's fanatics and fans around these small communities, and we think that. Again, Sparkade and other products like Sparkade, we think this could be the beginning of a whole new industry category in the app stores. Can create an opportunity to provide for an opportunity to create these micro communities for these smaller type games that could engage the user outside of the app itself.
Okay. So, Chris, with Disney, obviously it's one of the largest entertainment companies in the world, and everything you do is a license of some kind. Is there something about the licensed nature of what you do that kind of informs both monetization and engagement?
Well, we don't do, if by license you mean like IP.
IP, yeah.
Yeah. We publish about 2/3 of our games, and we license about 1/3 of them. Yeah, in terms of how we think about IP, I mean, the opportunity for an entertainment company, a traditional entertainment company with IP, is that, with the mobile platform, I can reach, a huge audience of almost everyone in the world who's interested in that thing anywhere they are. I can reach them on the train, I can reach them in these nooks and crannies of their day, and engage them in daily storytelling, around our characters. And so, one of the things that, recently, in fact, we were pretty pumped because the filmmakers of Wreck-It Ralph 2 contacted us because they wanted to do an event with us in Disney Crossy Roads to launch, to announce the Wreck-It Ralph 2. And so we had a stream video from them, and then Wreck-It Ralph was going through all the different levels and wrecking them in Crossy Roads. And it was a great takeover, and the fact that we've gotten to the place where the filmmakers are actually looking at games as a place to make news because of the reach that they have with people every day. It's definitely a different way for a company like Disney that I think traditionally would look at games as a consumer product as opposed to a pure type of media. For them to start looking at it as like, wow, the reach of this is so powerful that we could make this news almost anywhere, but we're going to make it in a game because it reaches directly our fans, and we can do it in such an immersive way. That kind of changing attitude, I think is something that's starting to draw storytellers into the process, and they're starting to see the opportunity to reach their fans every day through games.
Right. So that's really interesting that the value goes beyond just monetizing. Like I'm getting a certain ARPDAU, but I'm really getting value in marketing, co-promotion dollars.
Yeah, I mean, look, it says something that we can debate the success of the Angry Birds movie as a film, but the fact that you had a film that was even for 1 week a #1, box office film based on a mobile game says something about the power of the mobile platform and its ability to make IP and reach people.
Right.
Totally.
But now it took. Well, because we've worked together on monetization through video ads, which sometimes people see as incongruous with licensed properties and just adds complexity. Can you talk a little bit about how Disney approached video ad monetization and the final decision that hey, yeah, it's okay that we can actually add video ads into our games?
Yeah, so I've flipped our entire portfolio of games over to rewarded video advertising. And we've actually done consumer studies on this, and the thing that we find is that people hate interstitial video. They hate, they generally dislike stuff like banners and things that are interrupted to their experience. But when people are given the option to, watch a video, you've got to, we're seeing in some of our games, up to 30-40%, of the folks playing the game are monetizing with us who never would have monetized with us previously. And it's because, we're giving them a way to participate in the core economy of the game through advertising, even though they're the type of player who would just never pay. In a typical free-to-play game, you're looking at 2%, 3% of your audience is ever going to convert. We see it as a really important alternative to and complement to in-app advertising. And if you do it right, what you'll find, what you really want to do is make advertising kind of a habitual thing. And the ad cap, Venture Capitalist does a great job of this, where you come in, you watch the ad, you get a boost for your session for like 2 hours or something like that. And so it just becomes part of the way you play the game. You come in, you watch the ad, you get your boost, and you keep playing. And when it's done right, we have not seen it be cannibalistic. We see it as entirely incremental, even with payers. But the reason that we decided to do rewarded video advertising was not really just the ability to sell ads and make money off that as a revenue stream, but just the realization that we needed an affordance in our game to cross-promote to our own games. And if we're not using our own ad inventory to drive our network and our games, we're buying it from Facebook or somebody else. And so there's so many things that we can do with rewarded video, whether it be, use it for our own purposes, sell it, use it to cross-promote to other parts of the business, use it to promote films, all sorts of things that, it just opens up the opportunity to do so many creative things in terms of partnerships. So that's why we've put so much focus on it.
Right.
Yeah, and we actually, in our portfolio, we've flipped, I think since early 2015 to try and get ads rewarded video to most of our games. And a lot of our games are mid-core games. And a lot of people would stay away from, oh no, just put ads into your casual games and make money out of that, and leave the mid-core games alone. And we're not doing that. We're actually pushing this to as many games as possible. A lot of times it's not possible due to just bandwidth of the developers that we're working with. But ultimately what we've seen, it's kind of what you were saying, it's we really believe if you tie ads into the core loop of the game, players are actually going to look forward to watching their ads, and it almost becomes part of the appointment mechanic. So you're monetizing players in an alternate way, and all of a sudden it's both a monetization and an engagement mechanic right at the core of your game. We've seen that super successful with venture capitalists. They get 40% of players engaging with ads. Some of our latest idle games are actually seeing up to 60-70% engagement rate with the ads, which is, it's huge, and it's not disruptive at all. It's complementary, and it brings players back to the game, and they look forward to that piece. And then, as you were saying, it gives you like other creative ways to maybe cross-promote or just do more interesting things with those units, but it gives you that space.
I mean, to put a finer point on it, I mean, you know, advertising is incredibly important as a form of monetization to the media industry, right? And, you know, imagine if you took television and turned off all the advertising tomorrow, you know, most of your favorite shows wouldn't go on air. And so, you know, we live in the free-to-play world. The success rate just on IAP is too low to support most games, and that's why you're starting to see studios either get bought or sell or those kind of things. So, and the other thing we're seeing is that as television declines, ad dollars need a place to go. And if you're going to go to the mobile platform and you think that 30-40% of engagement every day on mobile is happening through advertising, it's going to have, is happening through games, then ads, if you want to, if ads are going to reach the mobile platform, they've got to be in games and in addition to social networks.
So it sounds like that it's not about a choice between balance of engagement and monetization. It sounds like they're much more intertwined in a more meaningful way. It's not an either or, it's definitely an and. And I think that what you mentioned about integrating monetization in with the core loop is really a fascinating question, I guess, to ask any developer publisher. How are you linking the two to make it so that it's a more powerful combination? We have, I guess, 1 minute left. I wanted to open it up to questions from the audience. If anybody had any questions for the panelists? No questions. Oh, we got one.
I'm curious about your comment at the beginning about egg ink. I haven't played myself, but I have a friend that does. And I'm curious what you think it's doing that's unique from all the other idle games out there.
I think it's an interesting merger of the builder genre and the idle genre. And the thing I like about the idle genre is that it rewards people when they're not in the game, and so when you come back, you progressed and you feel that much more engaged, which isn't the case with most games. If you don't come back, you haven't moved ahead, and so you kind of feel like you missed out instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I got all this stuff and I'm ready to jump back in. And the other thing I like about the game is just the speed of building. The thing that I think has been happening with mobile games is that they're getting more and more. There was a trend in the industry that was towards like AAA, right? And we've seen that those games generally have not worked out as well as people thought. And you look at what Supercell has done with Clash Royale. It's actually a simpler game than Clash of Clans. And so this whole idea of like refining the mobile model and not trying to go more console but going more mobile, I think is the trend that we're seeing. I mean, Pokemon Go is the same. And so I love in Egg Inc. that idea that I'm just progressing and getting invested like really, really quickly, as opposed to the slow way that I normally feel that in a resource builder. So that's why I find that game so engaging.
Anybody else have any questions?
I would just say as a parting thought, they're still games. So let's focus on your core loop, right? Focus on making a really great experience that delights your customer. The monetization will come. Think through the monetization in advance. I agree with that. But don't overemphasize it to the exception of making an awesome game that people love.
Any other parting thoughts? Tammy? Don't feel...
Yeah, no, I would echo that. As I was saying, if you start from a monetization place, you'll end up with a three-legged monster that doesn't know how to walk or run or do anything. You want to start with a really good base, and that's just going to be your game. And from there, you can figure out the monetization that can go on top of it. And it's actually like moving monetization. It's much simpler than moving retention or engagement. Exactly. So focus on what's hard first.
Exactly.
my parting thought is thank you very much for attending, and look forward to seeing you all the whole day.